Touch ID was an electronic fingerprint recognition feature designed and released by Apple Inc. Touch ID is a fingerprint recognition feature on Apple devices like iPhones, iPads, and Macs, allowing users to securely unlock their devices and authorize purchases with their fingerprint. It utilizes a fingerprint sensor and advanced security technology to analyze and store a mathematical representation of your fingerprint, enabling quick and convenient authentication. In 2012, Apple acquired Authenticate, a company focused on fingerprint reading and identification management software, for $356 million. The acquisition led commentators to expect a fingerprint reading feature. Following leaks and speculation in early September the next year, the iPhone 5S was unveiled on September 10, 2013, and was the first phone on a major U.S. carrier to feature the technology. Apple's Vice President of Marketing, Phil Schiller, announced the feature at Apple's iPhone Media event and spent several minutes, the major portion of the conference, discussing the feature. Wells Fargo analyst Maynard predicted on September 4, 2013, that a fingerprint sensor in the iPhone 5S would help mobile commerce and boost adoption in the corporate environment. Said, as consumers increasingly rely on mobile devices to transact and store personal data, a reliable device-side authentication solution may become a necessity. With the unveiling of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus at a keynote event on September 9, 2014, Touch ID was expanded from being used to unlock the device and authenticating App Store purchases to also authenticating Apple Pay. The iPhone 6s incorporates a second-generation Touch ID sensor that is up to twice as fast as the first-generation sensor found in the 5s, 6, and SE, first-generation, phones. As of August 2022, the iPhone 6s, SIXS Plus, 7, 7 Plus, 8, 8 Plus, SE, second generation, SE, third generation, 2016 and later MacBook Pro, 2018 and later MacBook Air, iPad Pro, second generation, and later, iPad Air, third generation, and later, and iPad Mini, fifth generation, or later are the Apple devices which use the second generation sensor. The new Touch ID unlocks almost instantly and posed an issue as it unlocks too fast to read notifications on the lock screen. This is remedied with the iOS 10 update, in which a user must press the home button to have the home screen appear. It, however, can be changed in iOS settings so that users can go directly to the home screen after resting their finger on the sensor, similar to previous versions of iOS. Solely placing a finger on the sensor will only unlock the iPhone unless said setting is enabled, and no notifications are currently being displayed on the lock screen. Touch ID was retained on iPhone 8, second generation iPhone SE, third generation iPhone SE, and the base model iPads, while all other iPhones since the iPhone X in 2017, and the higher-end iPad Pro have adopted Face ID recognition. Several iPads that do not have Face ID, such as the iPad Air, 4th generation and onwards, iPad Mini, 6th generation and onwards, and the iPad, 10th generation and onwards, feature a new sleep/wake button with an integrated Touch ID sensor. In 2020, 2021, and 2022, Apple unveiled a new Magic Keyboard with optional Touch ID for its line of iMacs, Mac Studios, and Mac Minis, and also the MacBook Pro. On February 19, 2025, following the announcement of the iPhone 16e, served as the low-entry model of the iPhone 16 series, and discontinuation of its spiritual predecessor iPhone SE, third generation, all the iPhone models with Touch ID were consequently discontinued. Usage. It allows users to unlock devices, make purchases in the various Apple digital media stores, App Store, iTunes Store, and Apple Books Store, and authenticate Apple Pay online or in apps. It can also be used to lock and unlock password-protected notes on iPhone and iPad. Touch ID was first introduced in iPhones with the iPhone 5S in 2013. In 2015, Apple introduced a faster second-generation Touch ID in the iPhone 6s, A year later in 2016, it made its laptop debut in the MacBook Pro integrated on the right side of the touch bar. Touch ID has been used on all iPads since the iPad Air 2 was introduced in 2014. In MacBooks, each user account can have up to 3 fingerprints, and a total of 5 fingerprints across the system. Fingerprint information is stored locally in a secure enclave on the Apple A7 and later chips, not in the cloud, a design choice intended to secure fingerprint information from users or malicious attackers. Touch ID is built into the Home, Top, button, which is built of laser-cut sapphire crystal, and does not scratch easily. Scratching would prevent Touch ID from working. It features a stainless steel detection ring to detect the user's finger without pressing it. There is no longer a rounded square icon in the Home button, nor is it concave. The sensor uses capacitive touch to detect the user's fingerprint. The sensor has a thickness of 170 μm, with 500 pixels per inch resolution. The user's finger can be oriented in any direction and it will still be read. Apple says it can read subepidermal skin layers and it will be easy to set up and will improve with every use. The sensor passes a small current through one's finger to create a fingerprint map of the user's dermis. Up to 5 fingerprint maps can be stored in the secure enclave. Security and privacy. Touch ID can be bypassed using passcodes set up by the user. Fingerprint data is stored on the secure enclave inside the Apple A7 and later processors of iOS devices, the T1 and T2 on Intel Macs, and the M1 and later on Macs with Apple Silicon and recent iPads featuring M-series processors. This data is not on Apple servers, nor on iCloud, and is not accessible by Apple or any third parties. From the efficient texture comparison patent covering Apple's Touch ID technology. In order to overcome potential security drawbacks, Apple's invention includes a process of collapsing the full maps into a sort of checksum, hash function, or histogram. For example, each encrypted ridge map template can have some lower resolution pattern computed and associated with the ridge map. One exemplary pattern could be a histogram of, example the most common angles, example a two-dimensional, 2D, array of common angles. The exemplary pattern could include in each slot an average value over a respective vector of the map. The exemplary pattern could include in each slot a sum of the values over a respective vector of the map. The exemplary pattern could include the smallest or largest value within a respective vector of the map or could be a difference between a largest and a smallest value within the respective vector of the map. Numerous other exemplary embodiments are also possible, and any other exemplary pattern calculation can be used, where the exemplary pattern includes enough associated information to narrow the candidate list, while omitting enough associated information that the unsecured pattern cannot easily be reverse engineered into a matching texture. If the user's phone has been rebooted, has not been unlocked for 48 hours, has its SIM card removed or has emergency SOS activated, only the passcode a user has created, not their fingerprint, can be used to unlock the device or during other specific use cases. In September 2013, the German Chaos Computer Club announced that it had bypassed Apple's Touch ID security. A spokesman for the group stated, "We hope that this finally puts to rest the illusions people have about fingerprint biometrics. It is plain pity to use something that you can't change and that you leave everywhere every day as a security token." Similar results have been achieved by using PVA glue to take a cast of the finger. Others have also used Chaos Computer Club's method but concluded that it is not an easy process in either time or effort, given that the user has to use a high-resolution photocopy of a complete fingerprint, special chemicals, and expensive equipment, and because the spoofing process takes some time to achieve. Impact. In a 2013 New York Magazine opinion piece, technology columnist Kevin Roos argued that consumers are generally not interested in fingerprint recognition, preferring to use passcodes instead. Traditionally, he wrote, only business people used biometric recognition, although they believe Touch ID may help bring fingerprint recognition to the masses. Roos stated the feature will also allow application developers to experiment, Should Apple open up access to Touch ID later on, which they have done, but that those wary of surveillance agencies such as the U.S. National Security Agency may still choose not to use Touch ID. Roos also noted that fingerprint technology still has some issues, such as the potential to be hacked, or of the devices not recognizing the fingerprint, for example, when the finger has been injured. Adrian Kingsley Hughes, writing for ZDNet, said Touch ID could be useful in bring your own device situations. He said the biometric protection adds another layer of security, removing the ability of people to look over others' shoulders and read their passcode/password. He added that Touch ID would prevent children from racking up thousands of dollars in unwanted purchases when using iPhones owned by adults. He observed that Touch ID was Apple's response to the large number of iPhone crimes, and that the new feature would deter would-be iPhone thieves. Moreover, he notes that the feature is one of the few that distinguish the iPhone 5S from the 5C. Roos also stated the feature is intended to deter theft. However, Brent Kennedy, a vulnerability analyst at the United States Computer Emergency Readiness Team, expressed concern that Touch ID could be hacked and suggested that people not rely on it right away. Forbes noted a history of fingerprints being spoofed in the past, and cautioned that the fingerprints on a stolen iPhone might be used to gain unauthorized access. However, the article did say that biometrics technology had improved since tests on spoofing fingerprint readers had been conducted. Kingsley Hughes suggested the Touch ID as a form of two-factor authentication, combining something one knows, the password, with something you are, the fingerprint. Forbes said that, if two-factor authentication is available, it will be an overall improvement for security. Forbes columnist Andy Greenberg said the fact that fingerprint data was stored on the local device and not in a centralized database was a win for security. Fingerprint scanners are a type of biometric security device that identify an individual by identifying the structure of their fingerprints. They are used in police stations, security industries, smartphones and other mobile devices. Fingerprints. People have patterns of friction ridges on their fingers. These patterns are called the fingerprints. Fingerprints are uniquely detailed, durable over an individual's lifetime, and difficult to alter. Due to the unique combinations, fingerprints have become an ideal means of identification. Types of fingerprint scanners. There are 4 types of fingerprint scanners. Optical scanners take a visual image of the fingerprint using a digital camera. Capacitive or CMOS scanners use capacitors and thus electric current to form an image of the fingerprint. This type of scanner tends to excel in terms of precision. Ultrasonic fingerprint scanners use high-frequency sound waves to penetrate the epidermal, outer, layer of the skin. Thermal scanners sense the temperature differences on the contact surface, in between fingerprint ridges and valleys. All fingerprint scanners are susceptible to spoofing through fingerprints replicated using photographs and 3D printing. Construction forms. Each type of fingerprint sensor can take 2 basic forms, the stagnant and the moving fingerprint scanner. Stagnant, the scanning module is mounted statically, and the user is required to swipe their fingers across it. This is cheaper but also less reliable than the moving form. Imaging can be less than ideal if the finger is not dragged over the scanning area at constant speed. Moving, the scanning module is mounted on a movable surface, while the user's finger can remain static. Because this layout allows the scanning module to pass the fingerprint at a constant speed, this method is generally more reliable. Form factors. Peripherals. Add-on fingerprint readers for PCs initially appeared in the late 1990s in the form of PCMCIA modules. Microsoft released a model in its IntelliMouse line with an integrated fingerprint reader in 2005. Integrated readers. Laptops with built-in readers emerged around the same time as peripheral readers with devices such as NEC's MC/R730F. IBM produced laptops with integrated readers starting in 2004. Apple introduced fingerprint scanners to their devices under the name Touch ID in 2013. These were initially released on the iPhone 5, with the technology remaining exclusive to iPhones until the release of the 2016 MacBook Pro. On both laptops and smartphones, the fingerprint sensor usually uses a USB or I2C interface internally. Thank you for watching this video.